Today we're looking at Birmingham Pen Company's Bloomfield Red. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Birmingham's Bloomfield Red is, as it says, a red ink. Now, to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. Finally, I put it into a Pilot Metropolitan with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing sample, let's take a look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left, we see that it flees the water. It runs completely up. On top of that, it becomes a much lighter red. It's almost pinkish on the right and red on the left. Now, the one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and it looks exactly the same. We expect no permanence from this. Resistance tests are done to see how we can expect the ink to perform on the page, and more importantly, how difficult it might be to clean out of your pen. When we look at the highlighter, it's a surprising result on this page because it didn't seem to reactivate and feather out everywhere. It didn't seem to spread. It didn't seem to have any kind of negative effect. But now when we look at the water, what we see is a tremendous amount of this ink immediately came off the page. It left a light pink behind. So I guess if you got it wet, you would be able to recover it. I think water is all you would likely need to clean it out. Pen Flush did about the same as the water. It did push it away a bit more than the water did, but the amount removed is the same. Bleach, as can be expected, completely removed it from the page. For the inks I've tested, I found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the range of normal being 2.1 to 2.9. Now, Birmingham's Bloomfield Red has a viscosity of 1.73. That is a very wet ink, or at least quite wet. To find my average dry time, I use the writing samples of the extra fine and medium nib done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper, and I average all 6 of those. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Now, Birmingham Bloomfield Red has an average dry time of 9 seconds, which makes it quite fast drying. So along with being very wet, it is very fast drying, which is nice to see. Now let's look at the writing sample. I got this ink in sample form, and their samples have a tendency to be a little messy, so use a very ink-safe space. To keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub. I use a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at Clairefontaine. Even getting this out, I get ink on me. Okay. We have no bleed, no ghosting, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, minor shading throughout. Look, that's all with the 1.1. I'm sorry, with the 1.1. No shading. With the extra fine, it's the same tone of red. So we're getting the same tone. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Minor shading that does occur occasionally. I see a little bit that shows up in dog. I see a little bit shows up in dry. A little shading shows up in over. But that's about it. 4 seconds to dry. With a medium, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Almost no shading. Goes down a little thicker so we don't really get to see that shading show up. 9 seconds to dry. And with the extra fine and the medium in the scrubby, we see the extra fine should give us more shading. That we are seeing some of it up here. And with the medium, we see almost no shading, which is just like what we see in the writing sample. In both cases, with the smear, it looks like I would be able to recover it. Moving on to Tomoe River. We have no bleeding. We have ghosting because it's Tomoe River. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. In the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade.
8 seconds to dry. Medium, same shade of red all the way through with this writing. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, and 14 seconds to dry. When we look at the scrubby, we see that in both cases we get no color variation, which lets us know we're probably not going to get any in the writing. And the smear, I don't know that I could recover that if I smeared it when I was writing. Looking at Rhodia paper, we get no bleeding, no ghosting. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shading in the writing, but we do have a shade difference between that and the extra fine. It's a little bit darker with the 1.1. Moving on to the extra fine, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade in the writing. 5 seconds to dry, but in the shade, we're seeing other shading. We're seeing different tones of the colors from the 1.1 to that extra fine. And then from the extra fine to the medium, it goes back to a darker, richer red again. It's kind of a dusty light red. Unless it's thick, then it gets a bit darker. But there I'm talking about the amount of ink that goes down with the pen, not in the writing itself. The medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shading in the writing itself. Looking at the scrubby, it looks like I should have some shade. It makes me wonder if in a much wetter, like a much wetter pen or in a stub, if this would, like a dry stub, this would perform much better. And I didn't take my notes with a dry stub, so that didn't sort of help there. And I don't think I've used it in it, but I might write that down as something to just try later with this. When it comes to the smear, I might be able to recover that. That's kind of a toss-up, whether I can see the lines, because I can see some of the lines, but not all of the lines. Levenger paper. With Levenger paper, we have no bleeding, no ghosting. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. The same tone of red is given with the extra fine. The extra fine gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. 3 seconds to dry. Fast dry time with this paper. On the medium, same tone again. So it's very consistent red. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade in that writing whatsoever. 6 seconds to dry. Looking at both the extra fine and the medium scrubby, we see that we're not going to get any kind of shading with this ink because it doesn't show in the scrubby. Normally this will give us some form of shade if it can be achieved. Nothing. But I could definitely recover the smear. And on to black and red. The black and red notebook paper. We have no bleeding. We have no ghosting. With the 1.1, I mean, here's a good example of where you can see shade difference in the pen. There's a definite difference between the medium and the 1.1, and it stands out more with the extra fine in between them. Looking at that 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade in that writing whatsoever. The extra fine as a tone is definitely lighter, definitely quite a bit lighter than the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, and only 3 seconds to dry. Darker again, and a tad darker than the 1.1. Just a tad darker for the medium nib. The medium gives us no feathering, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 5 seconds to dry. The black and red paper definitely is a good paper for people to use. It's performed well on a lot of inks for me. Looking at the scrubby, with the extra fine and the medium, we have no shade difference in this scrubby for either of them. This is where, it becomes obvious if you just go paper by paper looking at the scrub. If you don't see shading, you're probably never going to see shading. The smear, I could almost definitely recover it. Almost definitely. There's 1 or 2 lines in there that are hard to see. Other than that, this ink on this paper, if you smear it right after you write it, you would still be able to see it. So for lefties, not that, smearing your ink all over the place is a good thing, but it wouldn't end whatever you wrote. And that's what I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Birmingham's Bloomfield red, I would prefer to find an ink that complements that red on the page. I've chosen Colorverse Season 1's Proxima B for being a very nice blue-black ink. Now, before I give my opinions on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Birmingham's Bloomfield red? I think it's a nice dusty red, but to me, it's dull. Yesterday, we saw a great red with a lot of shading, and shading is the property I care the most about. Dusty reds are not my thing. It's just a color and tone of it that I don't care for. But it's not a bad ink. If you like dusty tones, this is a great ink for you. Thanks for watching.